listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast by Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb, Dr. Fredrick J. Long, Dr. Mario Melendez, Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and J. M. Smith. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello, welcome back to Constituent Marking with Fred Long on Proof Text. I'm Fred Long. We're looking at 1 Corinthians 12:15, and this is a interesting verse because of the logic. There's a lot of negating going on, and it gets a little tricky. So bear with me. I'll try to read out loud and demonstrate the marking method, speaking it through. For those of you who might be listening in, for those who are watching, you can see what I'm doing. One of the first things I note is that there is no connector. This is called a syndeton. And so in verse 15, syndeton, how do you spell syndeton? Syndeton, there you go. And so there's no connector. And so this creates a bit of a break with what comes before. And so we need to ask, what motivates the syndeton? I think what motivates it, if you look back at 12:14, is he talked about we're not one member but many. So there's this general idea in the previous verse, 2:14 or 12:14. And so here there's a move to specifics. So I think this is what's motivating the lack of connector here, because Paul is going to be looking at some specific scenarios related to that principle, a move from general to specific. That can be the reason why there's a syndeton, no connector, because there's no conjunction that signals that, and so you have no connector. So I think that's what's going on. We start with eon, ipe, opodos. So opus, I should say, opus. Opus is single underline. That is the definite article o with pus, third declension noun, meaning foot. It's nominative, so it receives a single underline. The aeon receives a box, which is a green box. This is actually starting a subordinate clause. And it expects the subjunctive mood. So with ipe, we have that subjunctive mood. This is starting a protasis, a supposition of a conditional sentence. If the foot says, so this itself is a subordinate clause, and then we're going to get into the direct statement of what the foot says, and it begins also a subordinate clause. A direct discourse is a type of subordinate clause. And then not only does it begin direct discourse, but then the beginning of the direct discourse has an OT. Now this OT is also starting a subordinate clause. So we're getting layering of subordinate clauses. And so each of these receives a bracket. So at the start of OT, you have a bracket that I number 2. I have number 2, and then also a bracket I've numbered 3. Because the OT clause itself is going to be concluded. And I think it concludes after uk, imi, kier. So that concludes the OT clause, which I'm going to number 3. So that clause is ended. This is the uk there, uk, imi. The uk is dotted, circled, or dotted, lined, boxed. Imi is single underlined, and the kier is also single underlined. So these this is how I'd mark this part of it. Because I am not a hand. Because I'm not a hand starts this direct discourse. Because I'm not a hand, then I have a uk, which I dotted box or circle. I am not from the body. Imi, single underline, then ektu somatos receives parentheses. Because I am not a hand, I am not from the body. So far, this is what the this foot is saying. So if the foot says, because I am not a hand, I am not of the body. I'm not from the body or apart from the body. This is where the two things close. First of all, the direct discourse closes, so I put a bracket after ek to somatos to close off the direct discourse. At the same time, it's also ending the if part of the sentence, the supposition, the aeon part of it. So if the foot says, that all is ending right there. So if the foot says, because I'm not a hand, I am not from the body. So that's the whole supposition. And we'll have to consider what kind of conditional sentence this is at the end. So that's how I would mark this up. You can see that, those of you who are watching. Then we have uk para tutu, tuto. So the is negating the para tuto, and then you have an uk estin. So those are single underlined. The estin single underlined. The uk again is dotted, boxed, or circled. And then you have an ek to somatos, prepositional phrase. And then you have what appears to be a question mark, a semicolon at the end there. So this is the main sentence. And so what is going on here? Well, the u para tuto at the beginning, the tuto is referring, this demonstrative pronoun, para tuto, I would translate that from this or on this basis. And the tuto is referring back to this whole if clause. And so this whole if clause in 15a, if the foot says, because I'm not a hand, I'm not from the body, this is what would be considered a left dislocated framework. This is a framework. These constructions mark some dislocation. We've already noted some dislocation, or I should say not dislocation, but discontinuity. There's some discontinuity with what has gone before. And part of that we've already recognized because there is a syndeton. There's some break going on there. So what makes this left dislocated framework is that it is a subordinate clause. And then the trace referring back to it, this tuto, picks it back up. And that's what makes this construction notable and observable, is that it's picked back up with the tuto. Not from this basis. Not from this basis. It is not from the body. Right? Correct? And so I'm adding this correct because I think this is a question expecting a positive answer. So remember the rule of MNOP. The rule of MNOP may expects a negative answer. U or uki expects a positive. And so here, because of these ooks being, the oo and the ook being present, I think this is expecting a positive answer. Now, this is tough to translate. I mean, because you have so many negatives floating around. So a couple possibilities. I mean, the Greek text has a semicolon there. And so that's one way to punctuate it. But of course, that punctuation is interpretive. Now, English translations don't have it as a question. So, is there a question? Is there not a question? So if you look at the NASB, it's simply just a statement, not a question. But the Greek text, the way that they've punctuated, which is interpretive, they put a question. So here's a couple different options. If you have it as a question, it needs to expect a positive response. So you might translate it something like this. Along this basis, isn't it not apart from the body? Yes, it is not separated. Another way that you could translate it, if you don't have a question there, is not because of this statement is it not from the body. So, well, that's how I would do constituent marking of this verse. You have to unpack the logic. And before I leave, we need to consider what kind of condition is this? Well, you have aeon with the subjunctive followed by a present indicative. And this would make it a present general truth condition. This is a generally true condition. So whatever obtains to this, it is generally understood to be true. You can't just speak yourself out of the body because you're not a certain type of thing. Because the body of Christ has many parts, not just one part. And just because you don't consider yourself to be one part, it doesn't remove you from the body. That's the point that's being made here. Well, I hope you found this helpful, and look forward to having you continue with us as next time we'll look at 1 Corinthians 12:16. Take care.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.